Welcome back. You're watching France 24. Coming up, final hours of voting in the Netherlands, where the center-right's Mark Rutte is vying to become his country's longest-serving prime minister. We'll get a live update from Amsterdam. The Paris area braces for weekend lockdowns. This as a new COVID spike swamps area hospitals. The government's formal announcement coming Thursday. A Japanese court rules that forbidding same-sex marriage is unconstitutional. But the only G7 nation to shun same-sex unions still needs a new law to be able to legalize gay marriage. Strong turnout in the Netherlands on the third and final day of voting in a general election that, when it's all said and done, could lead to the center-right's Mark Rutte becoming the country's longest-serving prime minister. First projections expected after polls close. That's at 9 p.m. local time. Let's get the latest now with correspondent Fernand van Tetz. Fernand, what's the latest?
Has been pretty good. 57% of those 13 million eligible voters have shown up to the polls. Now, we have to keep in mind, of course, the polls were open already.
All right, I've lost the connection there. We'll try to reconnect with Fernand van Tetz shortly. Paris is bracing for weekend lockdowns again. Decisions from a cabinet meeting to be unveiled Thursday evening by the Prime Minister. The writing is on the wall, what with capital area hospitals swamped and new, more infectious COVID variants threatening a nation that's marking 1 year since its initial national lockdown. Catherine Viette has more.
As new coronavirus cases rise sharply, the French government is taking action.
We decided this morning that extra measures will need to be taken in a number of regions. Over the next hours, we'll be speaking with local councillors in the Île-de-France and Hauts-de-France regions, as well as neighbouring areas, to discuss the current situation.
The announcement paves the way for more curbs in the Paris region. Residents say they aren't thrilled with the prospect of another lockdown.
When you live in Paris and have a small apartment, it's more complicated than when you have a house in the countryside.
There's a feeling of, I work during the week and then I stay cooped up in a hamster box or a fishbowl all weekend.
One day you're told that you'll be in lockdown, the next day it's lifted. It's like a yo-yo.
But with more than 400 cases per 100,000 residents, the healthcare system in the Paris region is in crisis mode. The intensive care units are at capacity, forcing the government to transfer patients to other hospitals around the country, a decision that many patients' families have opposed.
The virus is not under control. There are as many patients in intensive care now as there was during the peak of the second wave, when it was starting to go back down. The time has come for more restrictions because it's not at all starting to go back down. We're instead in a phase of acceleration.
The government has ruled out closing schools. The rest of the new restrictions will be announced by the Prime Minister on Thursday.
Less than 3 weeks after becoming the first French president sentenced to hard jail time in a corruption case, Nicolas Sarkozy on trial again. The former conservative leader charged in another affair, the Bigmalion case. If found guilty, he could be sentenced to up to a year in jail and more than 3,000 euros fine. Valerie de Kemp has more.
The accusations date back to 2012. When Nicolas Sarkozy was running for his second term as president. Prosecutors say Sarkozy's party spent nearly 43 million euros during his campaign, double the amount permitted under electoral law. Sarkozy is accused of having hired a public relations firm known as Bigmalion to cover it up. According to investigators, the company generated fake bills for a total of 18 million euros to camouflage the cost of Sarkozy's extravagant rallies. Some of Big Malion's executives have since come forward and acknowledged the existence of a fraudulent scheme.
Je suis bouleversé de tout cela, d'autant que, vous l'avez dit, ce sont des collaborateurs, donc des gens qui ont abusé de ma confiance, quel qu'en soit le mobile.
14 people are set to go on trial this Wednesday, including Guillaume Lambert, Sarkozy's campaign director. But the former president has consistently denied any wrongdoing.
J'ai appris le nom de Big Malion longtemps après la campagne présidentielle.
Although prosecutors have failed to prove that Sarkozy personally orchestrated the system of fake invoices, they argue that he was aware of it, having received several warnings from his accountants. In recent years, Sarkozy has been involved in several scandals. Earlier this month, he was found guilty of forming a, quote, corruption pact with his lawyer, having bribed a judge in exchange for information on yet another investigation targeting him. In a verdict that stunned the country, Sarkozy was sentenced to 3 years in prison. He has appealed his conviction.
In an industrial neighborhood of Myanmar's largest city, Yangon, plumes of smoke seen this Wednesday, what are described as pitched battles taking place with blowback against martial law. Also this Wednesday, the country's most powerful Buddhist monk association calling on the junta to end violence against protests and accusing an armed minority, as they put it, of torture and killing innocent civilians since last month's coup. In Japan, a landmark ruling that, while it may be mostly symbolic, could pave the way to the legalization of same-sex marriages. It's in the northern city of Sapporo, the first of several ongoing cases where the ruling could pave the way in a very conservative nation for such unions to be fully recognized. Yuka Royer has more.
Plaintiffs and supporters hailed the verdict as a giant step towards marriage equality.
I couldn't stop my tears. I think the court has really sincerely considered the problems we face and delivered a really good verdict.
A court in Sapporo, north of Japan, ruled that not allowing same-sex couples to legally marry violated their constitutional rights to equality before the law.
Sexual orientation cannot be willfully chosen or changed. The fact that same-sex couples cannot enjoy the same legal benefits as heterosexual couples constitutes discriminatory treatment.
Under the current rules in Japan, gay couples cannot inherit their partner's assets or have parental rights over the other's children.
Apart from the gender of the person we love, nothing's different in our lives from heterosexual couples. But the state refuses to recognize that. This, I think, is clear discrimination.
Judges, however, rejected the plaintiff's damage claim against the government worth about €7,000 each. While the court recognized the violation of their rights to legal equality, Japan's constitution still defines marriage as based on the mutual consent of both sexes. It will take time before any new law is passed to legalize same-sex marriage. But for LGBT advocates in conservative Japan, Wednesday's ruling, the first in a series of similar ongoing cases, marks a victory, at least symbolically.
Strong turnout in the Netherlands, as we were saying earlier, our top story. It's the third and final day of voting in a general election that could see Mark Rutte's center-right lead. It would make him the longest ever serving prime minister in the Netherlands. Let's get more now.
The Netherlands Prime Minister since 2010, Mark Rutte, is one of Europe's longest-serving leaders. And in that time, he's elevated his nation to one of the EU's major political players. Rutte emerged as the captain of the so-called Frugal Four, a group of EU nations known for their budgetary rigor. It's a position that has chafed some of his counterparts, particularly in southern Europe, when his dedication to austerity extended to COVID bailouts.
What is very important to us is that countries reform. And if they want grants on top of loans, which we don't really want to happen, then we have to nail down very hard guarantees that reforms will be carried out.
Back at home, Rutte heads a coalition of 4 centrist parties, though he's been accused of ignoring racist, anti-immigration rhetoric to appease far-right voters. And he's earned the nickname Teflon Mark for his ability to shrug off crises. This includes a recent scandal where thousands of Dutch parents were wrongfully accused of fraud over child welfare payments. Rutte and his entire cabinet resigned, but remained in power in a caretaker role.
We zijn eensgezind.
We are of one mind that if the whole system has failed, we all must take responsibility.
With the COVID-19 crisis dominating Dutch politics over the past year, Rutte has been seen by many as a steady hand in crisis, though he did face riots in January against the introduction of a curfew.